There's a security standard that's pretty much hiding in plain sight. It operates just beneath the surface of our digital world, but it has these massive, real-world consequences. It's called FIPS 140. And honestly, if you're serious about data security today, you've got to understand what it is.
So, to really get why this matters, let's start with a story. Picture two companies. They're both doing great, both handle really sensitive info. And then, on the same Tuesday morning, an employee from each company leaves a laptop in a taxi. Just like that, the data's gone.
Now here's where it gets interesting. For one of these companies, this incident, it just spirals into a total catastrophe. But for the other, it's a minor headache, something that's handled and closed out by the end of the day. The laptops were identical, right? The data was just as sensitive. So, what's the difference? That is the big question we're going to unpack here.
And here you can see those two completely different realities, side by side. For Company A, the fallout is just brutal. We're talking massive fines from regulators. They're legally required to make these public notifications that completely destroy customer trust, and their reputation takes a huge long-term hit. But then you look at Company B, and none of that happens. No public announcement, barely a dent financially, and their reputation is totally fine. This isn't luck. It's about a very specific line of defense.
The secret ingredient, the thing that separates that catastrophe from just being an inconvenience, is this small but incredibly powerful certification. It's a standard that proves the digital lock on that lost laptop wasn't just there, it was provably strong.
And that standard is FIPS 140. Now, the formal definition is that it's the US government's benchmark for validating cryptographic modules, the engines that actually do the encryption. But an easier way to think about it is this. It is the government's official stamp of approval that your digital security is built the right way and works exactly like it's supposed to.
And let me tell you, this is not just some simple checkbox. Getting that FIPS stamp of approval is a really tough process. It means an independent lab, one that's accredited by the government, has basically torn your security apart to confirm three crucial things. 1, that your crypto algorithms are implemented perfectly, with no flaws. 2, that you're managing your cryptographic keys securely, from how they're made, to how they're stored, to how they're destroyed. And 3, it makes sure the whole thing is tamper-resistant. It's a deep, deep audit of the very heart of your security.
So, who actually needs this level of validation? This is where the landscape really splits into two different groups. And getting this split is totally key to understanding the power of FIPS 140. All right, so this slide really breaks down those two worlds of FIPS. Over in the first column, you've got mandatory compliance. We're talking US and Canadian federal agencies, and this is the important part, anyone who wants to sell to them. For this group, FIPS is the law, period. But then look at that second column, voluntary or de facto compliance. This group is way bigger. It's got huge commercial sectors like finance, healthcare, big tech. They aren't legally forced to use FIPS, but they choose to because other rules demand strong encryption, and FIPS has become the gold standard for proving you have it.
So for that first group, the rule is dead simple. If your company makes a product with any kind of encryption, a router, a cloud service, whatever, and you want the US or Canadian government as a customer, your product must have a FIPS 140 certificate. It's a non-negotiable ticket to the game.
But it's this voluntary group that really shows you the market power of this standard. For them, getting FIPS validated is a strategic business decision. It's how they show regulators, auditors, and especially their customers that they're serious about security and that they're doing their due diligence. It's all about building trust.
But there's one industry where this voluntary choice comes with an incredibly powerful incentive, which brings us to the safe harbor. This is where we see exactly how Company B from our story was able to walk away without a scratch. The whole connection is about healthcare and the HIPAA law, and it's a simple three-step logic. Step 1, HIPAA demands that organizations protect patient data with strong encryption. Step 2, HIPAA doesn't actually define strong, so FIPS steps in as the government-backed standard that does. And Step 3, this is the magic part. The law literally rewards you for using it.
And here it is. This is the reward. This is the safe harbor provision from the HIPAA breach notification rule. It basically says that if that lost laptop from our story had patient data on it, but it was encrypted using a FIPS-validated module, then legally, it's not a breach. The company is totally exempt from those devastating public notifications and fines. This one rule turns FIPS from a nice-to-have into a critical survival strategy.
Okay, so the link to patient data is crystal clear. But what about a company in the medical world that doesn't handle patient info?
like, say, a medicine distributor. Does FIPS still matter for them? The answer is a huge yes, but for totally different reasons.
For a company like a medicine distributor, two other major drivers kick in. First, if they're selling to government agencies like the VA or the Department of Defense, well, they're a federal contractor. That puts them right back in that mandatory compliance group. They have to use FIPS to protect the government's data. And second, there's a law for drug supply chains that requires them to prove their data is secure to prevent counterfeit drugs. And what's the gold standard for proving that? You guessed it, FIPS.
So far, we focused a lot on the US and Canada, but the influence of FIPS doesn't just stop at the border. It has really become a de facto global benchmark for security.
So take the European Union, for example. FIPS 140 isn't the law there. They have their own regulations, like GDPR and NIS2. But even in Europe, FIPS plays this really critical role as a powerful way to show that you're compliant with their rules. There are really three key ways FIPS gives you an edge in Europe. First, when a law like GDPR asks for appropriate security but doesn't define it, holding up a FIPS certificate is the easiest way to prove to an auditor you've met a super high standard. Second, if that European company wants to sell to the US government, FIPS suddenly becomes mandatory for them. And third, because the US government is such a massive customer, the world's biggest tech companies, your Microsofts, your Ciscos, they just build their products to be FIPS compliant from day one for everyone worldwide.
And here's some real-world proof of the respect this standard gets. Sweden's own transport agency, in their technical regulations, literally lists FIPS 140-2 as an acceptable security standard right next to the EU's own standards. They see it as being just as rigorous.
So, at the end of the day, here's the big takeaway. FIPS 140 is way more than just a government compliance checkbox now. It's a global, strategic tool. It's how you build trust with customers, how you prove you're doing the right thing to auditors, and how you unlock some of the biggest markets on the planet.
Which brings us right back to our two companies. And a final thought. In a world that is completely run on data, having a universally accepted, independently audited benchmark for security, well, that's incredibly powerful. And it leaves us with one last question. In a world like this, is a standard that proves trust ever really optional?